உலகெங்கும் தமிழரின் பிம்பம் உங்கள் TVI.
Good afternoon, dear viewers. Welcome to CrossRoads on TVI. I'm your host, Parthy Kandaval. Recently, there's been a significant media coverage of bullying in our schools. Many of you are probably aware of the Amanda Todd story in British Columbia, who ended her life after severe bullying, which continued after she switched schools. Last week in London, Ontario, 8 high school girls were arrested for bullying another student. They now face charges of criminal harassment. Bullying affects everyone. Parents, whether you're aware or not, bullying includes your children, whether they're victims of it, bullies themselves, or bystanders who allow the problem to continue. Today's discussion will be a bit different in that we have a grade 6 student, Gokul, joining our panel with 2 teachers who are no strangers to CrossRoads. Joining us again to discuss another important educational topic are Branavi Malvaganam, a high school teacher, and Haran Krishnan, an intermediate school teacher. As always, please call us at 416-623-8100 to ask your questions and share your thoughts on this important topic. Welcome to CrossRoads. So, as we discussed, as we mentioned, bullying is coming up again, at least in the media spotlight, media coverage. Why do you think this is happening? Because I remember growing up, we didn't have you may have a different experience. I remember growing up, bullying wasn't as much as a focus or had much attention.
I agree. I don't remember it being as giving it as much coverage either. But I also think the nature of the way we grew up is a lot different. Where if you were being bullied, to some extent, it stayed at school. It wasn't following you at home. It wasn't being tracked through the internet or through cell phones. Whereas now, I don't think kids have that same opportunity to leave the torture at school. I don't know if your experience was any different.
No, very, very different. No, there was a lot of bullying in my school growing up, right? I've been to, grown up a couple of schools, and yeah, there was a lot of bullying happening, but I think you make a good point. It didn't come home with you, right? You were able to turn that off when 3:30 hit, and if you get home safely, then you had a little some time to yourself. But now with the internet and social media, it's following you home. But I think bullying has always been there.
Sorry, my question was not so much was it there or not, but the focus, the media, the attention we're giving in schools.
I mean, we have a lot more coverage now with the internet and so forth. So I think people are more aware of it. We're more sensitive to it, which is more so now than I think when we were.
And I also think there was this idea that, bullying is just part of the school experience, whereas now I think in light of what's been happening, it's not just a school experience, it's sort of this thing that needs to be addressed.
And I think, traditionally a lot of parents or, watchers think of bullying as physical bullying or teasing maybe, but it's gotten and it has always been much more significant and complex. And what are some of the common forms of bullying you guys have seen as teachers?
Well, there's verbal, which is probably the most common. Something as small as a comment made or a gesture that continues. There's emotional. Of course, with today's technology, we have cyberbullying, which is very, very prominent now with kids. Those are 3 top of my head right now. Yeah, those would be the main ones that I think.
And I think that the physical bullying is, like you said, it's what comes to mind first, but it's not the worst one, I think. I mean, like you said, we were talking before, bodies heal to some extent. But when you're torturing someone mentally and psychologically, that I don't think that ever leaves you. I think that it's very hard to get over that.
Gohul, what are some examples of bullying you've seen in grade 6 or even before in other grades?
Some people might make other people bleed, like punching them a lot. Some people might say, no one likes you, not even your parents, you're a waste of space and stuff like that. So sometimes they say, get out of here, don't come to the school and stuff.
Wow. And how do the kids who get bullied, how do they handle that?
Well, since some kids aren't that sensitive, some kids don't care, which is a good thing because it won't affect them. Some kids might actually fight back. If you're punching them, that other kid might punch him back. Sometimes the kid might cry a lot.
And how have the teachers you've seen, how do they handle it?
Usually, since I think at our school bullying happens a lot, the teacher usually says to go to the office or sit on a rock. Like you can't get up from it. Sometimes, like if you do something like very bad, so say that you make a student bleed or something like that, or if you fight, sometimes you might get suspended. And sometimes you might like stay, like you can't go to a recess for like 1 week or two.
And do you think it usually works, those kind of responses?
Like
Those
for some kids,
Yeah,
some kids, like it's say like they're bullying because like their parents might not treat them well, or like say if they're like a new kid at their old school, they might got like bullied and stuff like that. So maybe it takes out their anger for bullying other people.
And what have been some traditional or successful strategies as teachers you've employed?
It's funny because with my grade 8s, with the entire Amanda Todd thing, we talked about it, and what we came across is it doesn't work. The campaigns we've had as educators and as growing up hasn't stopped bullying. And so we talked about why hasn't it? Why? Because by grade 8, they've had 10 years of anti-bullying sort of lectures and whatever it was. It's not really working. And so what I've asked my kids to do is it has to be student-centered. It has to, I mean, we have a grade 6 student here who hit it on the nail by saying the bullies are probably coming from a background where they're bullied themselves and they're acting up. I mean, that's from a grade 6 student. That's where we need to go with this. And we need less discourse with adults and more discourse with kids and figure out solutions from them. So I don't know if there's one that's worked.
And how did your class respond to the Amanda Todd? Was there shock, or was it something they kind of knew already and they were desensitized to it?
They were desensitized to it. And they were obviously upset by it, but it wasn't something enough for them to make whole heart changes. And that led into a discussion of is there less apathy in our younger generation than an older generation? And that was where we went with that. You know, do kids care less? And surprisingly, a lot of them thought, yes, teenagers today seem to care less about another human being than maybe in the past, which surprised me. And so we're continuing that discourse, and we'll see where it goes. But I'm letting the students run with that because it's their issue, really. And they have to sort of deal with it and come up with solutions to it.
Bradley, how have you, or what strategy have you used or seen that have been effective?
Well, I had the privilege of working at a really small school at my old school last year, and I remember there was this one girl who was like spitting, and this was in like the special ed program, so she was spitting and kicking at other students, and it was hard to deal with the parents because, well, for the admin to deal with the parents because the parents didn't speak English. Luckily, this girl spoke Tamil, so I was able to call home and, you know, to explain to them what exactly she was doing. And then as I was investigating, the family told me, you know, they get all these phone calls where the student was being called at home later in the evenings and harassed. So she would come to school, just like Ogo was saying, and then she would kick and spit at the ones that she was a little bit stronger than. But no, because of the language barrier, no one was able to find out exactly what was going on and why her behavior was this way. But it was just because she was being bullied at home by other students who were a little bit bigger and maybe more physically capable than she was. So she would come to school and pick on the kids that were smaller than her. But until like somebody was able to break that sort of barrier between the parents and the admin staff, nothing was addressed. And then finally, as the year went on, she was actually able to sort of change her behavior a little bit because somebody was there to take care of her. So I think.
So it seems like there needs to be more teacher-parent communication, but from my understanding, being a teacher as well, that takes a lot of effort.
Takes a lot of effort.
Beyond just the usual extracurricular activities, to communicate with parents off school hours, late in the evening. And what are some of like the challenges that come with that in terms of the expectations of teachers to go beyond what in a role where they're already going beyond?
I can't speak for every educator, but I'm pretty confident that majority of educators do not mind doing that extra. If we have a child who's emotionally or physically being assaulted or harassed, if that means I have to make a call at 10 o'clock, that's fine. I don't think most teachers are going to have an issue with doing that. The problem, I think, is though it's very invisible. right? For a student, he listed 10 bullying incidents. It'd be very difficult for me to see the same thing as an educator, right? Bullies are very good at keeping it sort of invisible and out of the teacher's ears or eyes.
Have teachers in your school, or have you noticed they've contacted the parents of the bully? And has that worked?
I don't think it's like work. Like I've asked like some people if their parents care if they do anything, and they've said no, they don't even care if they like punch anyone or do anything else. Like they don't care at all. So they don't really care. The parents don't care if he gets into a fight or if she gets into a fight or anything.
And it brings up a good question. Something I've noticed once or twice myself is that sometimes the parents are unwilling or refusing to admit their child has done something wrong. Have you experienced that?
Yeah.
Yes.
And how
pretty common. So, I mean, it's difficult for parents to accept. I mean, all parents view their children in a good light, and they should. So it's pretty hard for them to sort of acknowledge that, yeah, my son or daughter is doing these kinds of things. So there's always that initial shock. And sometimes it's even hard for parents whose students are victims to sort of sometimes realize that, yeah, my kid needs that extra help. Some parents still view it as, oh, it's part of growing up, especially with boys. Oh, you know, you got pushed around a little bit. That's part of growing up. Toughen up.
And you've seen parents who've kind of sidelined.
I've had conversations, sort of marginalize that experience and say it's okay.
Even though it's their own kid.
Yeah, even though it's on their own kid. And so I think overall for bullies and victims, it's kind of similar. And for parents, they kind of react the same way too. It's hard to accept that. And so yeah, there's that challenge.
You teach a school with a few Tamil students. How have Tamil parents reacted to whether their children have been identified as bullies and or being victims?
It ranges from parents being very, very active, being aware of what's happening and really working with the child to change it. We've had some kids who've changed their behavior tremendously.
With the parent involvement?
With the parent involvement, with the administration, with teachers, like phenomenal improvements. And we have some kids, some parents who aren't as involved and don't want to accept it. And it's very difficult for them for various reasons. And there hasn't been that improvement. So there's a variety of responses, I think.
And how does it vary, bullying by grade? You know, like it's certain form in grade 1, grade 6, and then in high school, right? Have you, through your experience, seen through the years that bullying changes? Or even by gender?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it gets serious as you get older. I mean, from the primary level, it could be something as name calling. And some people still view that as, oh, it's just kids being kids, it's okay. And then it kind of progresses to where in the junior grades, it could be like physical pushing and telling kids not to come to class, and they're now self-esteem issues. And then when you get to high school, it gets
attacking
to the
people's sexuality,
exactly,
or you know, any number of things.
What were the major common ones in high school you've seen?
That's the thing. I mean, in a high school classroom, it's difficult to see bullying in the classroom because, and you know, you only spend like 76 minutes with a set of kids, and then you don't see. It's not like in the elementary grades where kids sort of travel together, whereas every classroom is a different mix of kids. But you hear comments like, "Oh, that's so gay," or and then sometimes I stop and I say, "Exactly what is homosexual about that?" I try to make it clear that it's not okay to say those things. But those are the kind of comments that you hear, and then you wonder about the kids who are afraid to come out because, you know, there's comments being said like this. So that's the kind of stuff that I think worries me. Or when they make really racist comments like, "Oh."
That's interesting. I was going to ask that question. Growing up, you know, I certainly, you know, was bullied for being a certain race, and it was very obvious and very prevalent. Is that still happening now in Toronto schools, where, you know, where the minorities are the majority? Is that something? Is racist bullying happening?
A little bit I've seen in the intermediate levels, but I think it's more so in the high school. But also, but the sexual bullying is huge. Whether it's homosexuality or promiscuity, that's a big thing right now, I think. More so than racial at my level. There's a little bit of it.
Because in our generation, a lot of it was racial, right?
Or we were more aware of it because we were the ones being sort of
at the receiving end of it.
So we were more sensitive to it, right? So.
And has the phrase of bullying changed over the years? Has it been like one of the questions that has arisen is, you know, are we including more things? Like Gokul mentioned teasing. You know, he mentioned the teasing in grades 1, 2, and then that became bullying. So has that expanded?
I think so.
I think so. I think it's more of a wide array of things that it's like a big umbrella now, and it's kind of hard to differentiate between what is just regular teasing and a part of growing up and developing that sort of thick skin, and what's psychological damage.
Okay.
And I think, Gogo, what were you saying before about how, you know, when you were younger, you didn't know that teasing was the bullying?
Yeah, like so say like when you're in kindergarten and like that, like you wouldn't really know what bullying is. Like when you're teasing people, it's like, oh, you like a fart or something like that, because that's like a kid thing, right? But when you're in grade 1 and 2, like that's like more effective, because like you understand what it is, kind of. So that's why in grade 4 and 5, like in that time, like people get like I don't really see like anyone being racist that much, but like when people get really angry, they start being racist.
Interesting. So, before we go to break, when you noticed the bullies in grade 1 and 2, were they the same bullies in grade 5 and 6? Or did it changed?
Yeah, it changed. Like when the grade 1s and bullies, they're actually the nicer people later on.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, it's time for a quick break. Please join us after a few short announcements. Welcome back, dear viewers. In light of the recent Amanda Todd story in British Columbia and the recent arrest of 8 high school girls in London, Ontario, bullying has become to the forefront of our national discussion. Joining us today on a discussion on bullying, we have Haran Krishnan, Gokul, a 6th grade student, and Branavi Malvagaram. One of the newer aspects of bullying compared to when our generation was going through it is the introduction of the internet, and with that, social media. What are some forms of bullying on social media you've seen?
Definitely Facebook is a huge one, you know, just making private accounts or like separate accounts and sending people anonymous messages, threatening them, making fun of them. That's huge. I know that happened a lot at my old school. I'm not sure about my new school, but that one, and it just follows you. Like it's just, you know, because now they have cell phones where you can get the updates on their cell phone. So it's continuous. It doesn't stop. So I think that's a huge one. Also text messages. I guess if you have like a number that you can block. I think Gogo was saying, what's the new one you were saying? Skype. Skype is a big one now.
And what's happening?
Like Amanda Todd, like she thought she was with friends, and then like they told her to do that, and then the person recorded it and then send it to everyone, and then some random like person like called her or something like that saying
Is that happening in your school?
No, like
are kids using Skype?
No, I don't think they use Skype. Like they go outside mostly and talk to each other. Like they're more active.
That's good to hear. How about at your grade level, grade 7s and 8s?
Right, the social media with Twitter and Facebook and creating Facebook pages, like hate pages of somebody, and like kind of like the fake pages. Skype is slowly creeping in, not so much. But I think the issue is that they have more access to it. They have more the bullies or the people that are doing this have more access to their victims. Right? So before it was face-to-face time. So if you restrict that, you're okay, you're safe. Now you're not safe. I mean, it's 24 hours. They keep.
How can parents who have children at these vulnerable ages identify if their child is a bully or getting bullied?
Well, some of the signs for if your child is being bullied is there's going to be a behavior change, right? They're going to have more anxiety, sleep disorders. But they might not want to use the internet. Maybe they're not happy about going to school. But if their moods are changing, appetites are changing, you know something's wrong. And parents have to be very aware of that, right? And also when they're on Facebook. I mean, I've met so many kids who are under 10 that have Facebook accounts, and that scares me. That how parents are allowing their children unsupervised at such a young age to be on Facebook. So I think parents have to be a little bit more active. You have to be a little bit more involved and make sure, and then not to minimize it. You know, when a child comes up to you and says, you know, someone said something to me, be like, oh, that's normal, it's okay. Talk to the child, see where they're going.
And at high school level, how would you how can a parent identify if their child is a bully? Is that possible?
I think a lot of what Haran just said is true. It's the same thing, like, you know, they're more nervous or really quiet.
Even the ones who are bullies at school?
The ones that are bullies?
Who are bullies to identify?
I don't know.
That's
I mean, I think as teachers we have a hard enough time trying to identify the bullies, especially in a high school, because, like I said, you're not seeing the same kids over and over again. You see them. You don't really see that. You don't have the same interaction that I think you do with them at the elementary level. So I don't know how. Like sometimes I hear things and I have to go investigate, and sometimes it's just stuff that's blown out of proportion, and stuff sometimes it is a bully, but I don't know if I could give you a formula to identify one.
Yeah, I mean, it's certain high schools are difficult too. I'm sorry, elementary is difficult too, because they're on some elementaries are on rotary. So in my school, I see my students 80 minutes a day. That's it. Right. So we're kind of on rotary as well.
Go.
For our school, it's usually like something like in my old school and my new school, it's like. You can tell by, like, say if they need teacher help sometimes, like, those are the usually people who like are bullies. Like,
the ones who need teachers' help in academics?
No, like in like English and math, like that stuff. So then those are usually they're sometimes the bullies, and then some, like, my friend was playing like a game once. Call of Duty, I think, is something. Yeah. A 3 or like a 5-year-old was playing it. He said, and like the voice you can tell, and he was like swearing, stuff like that.
So a lot of it is a lot of our parents are not reading and observing a lot of the advisory messages. Is that something you've noticed in our community?
I don't think they know those advisory things exist.
That game you're talking about is for 18 and above, and if a 5-year-old's playing that, it's a very violent game, and if that's allowed to be played in the household, you're encouraging that child that behavior is okay. I mean, even as something as simple as Tamil movies, there's lots of violence in Tamil movies. I don't know if there's ratings or not, but we sort of think it's okay for our children, young children, to be watching that. Right, and I think a lot of this comes down to self-esteem for kids as well. I mean, you made a great point. He said one of the ways you can identify are the kids that need the extra academic help. Right. I mean, if you think about that those are kids who have low self-esteem. They're doing poorly in academics. They're struggling. They can't participate. They can't be involved in a meaningful way in class time. So when they get that 15 minutes off or after school, that's the time when they could sort of compensate. And they do that because of that low self-esteem. Right? And even with the victims, with a lot of the victims, and I think you made a point earlier, some kids don't care, they're not as sensitive. Well, that comes down to confidence. If you're a very confident kid or a very confident kid, things don't faze you as much. So, you know, maybe the way we go about this is, instead of focusing on the bully and the victims, well, why don't we do a preventive strategy? Why don't we focus on self-esteem? Why don't we try to get all kids, or a majority of kids, to understand their self-worth? What can we do to encourage them? Right? If you're not good in academics, that's okay. Let's focus on something different.
They can, to build that self-esteem.
Yeah, exactly. Gym or the arts. And in our community, it's changing, but a lot of our parents want our kids to be successful in the maths and sciences. And what if your child isn't, but it is a great artist? Maybe we want to focus on that.
Something that's valued as much in our community.
It's not, and maybe it should be. Right? And even with the media they're watching, I mean, you can speak more to this, but as a female, at a very young age, being exposed to makeup and dressing up and dancing, and it's harmless, and it's just, you know, in a family context, but you're sending the message to this child that your self-worth is based on your physical appearance. And as they get older and older, the parents' input is less and the peers more. They're just going to replace the parents with the peers. And if they think their self-value is from makeup and from dressing a certain way or being a certain way, then you're going to have some issues with that child.
Coming to that topic of bullying by gender, and you know, something I observed with my students is that there's a certain, it's very subtle but still pervasive by girls when they bully.
I think when girls bully, it's not as physical as when boys bully. Like, it's very much the psychological, like, you know, the cunning comments, stuff about their appearance, calling them fat, or, you know, comments like that. Whereas I think with boys, it's always about, you know, who's like the stronger, who can dominate, that alpha male idea. So I think that's where the difference is, where girls are more cunning and it's more verbal and it's more sly. And sometimes that's harder to pick up. versus where with boys, I think it's a lot more physical.
How can our parents at home better, frame with their daughters the immense pressure they get from the media and movies to be a certain way? How can our parents to balance all the pressure that movies put out, our competition?
That's a tough question because I think sometimes that pressure comes from the parents too, to look a certain way. I mean, I can tell you a number of times where I've seen parents and telling their kids, to lose some weight, you're too fat, or you're too dark, or you're too this, you're too that. And when that pressure is coming from the parents, and sometimes that the parents are being the bullies there. Like I've told off a number of uncles for calling their daughters too fat, and that's never okay, especially when you're at you're developing your own self-image, and you're someone who is supposed to care about you and supposed to love you no matter what. They're telling you that you're too heavy, or you're too skinny, you're too something.
And do girls take that and reproduce that in the classroom? Where
do you mean like if they take it and they
physical appearance comments and then they pass it on to their classmates?
I think once they've accepted that framework of yes, this is what women are supposed to look like, then they are going to pass on, and I don't necessarily think that's their fault. I mean, it's just sort of ingrained in them. That's their frame of mind now, and they think that's okay because it's somebody else who's older and supposedly wiser is telling them that.
Telling them. Gohul, do you see bullying happening amongst girls, whether in your new school or your old school?
When it's I see bullying. Like it's when they there's like two girls. They don't they're actually the bullies. No one really likes them because they're mean. Like they're first bullying other people, and then when everyone knew they were the real bullies, they didn't talk to them or anything like that. And then they were all mean to them. Some people were they were lying to each other and stuff like that. So because of that, they don't talk to those two people anymore.
Okay, so because of those two were bullying other kids, the rest of the class started avoiding them?
Yeah.
That's a good story to hear. Something that I've addressed actually this week in my own school is that there's no such thing as an innocent bystander. If you see bullying happening, you have a responsibility to act upon it. Is that fair to ask students if they see bullying happening, that it's a responsibility or duty to act upon it and resolve it?
What were you thinking?
Half. Because since our grade, our highest grade in our school is 8 and 7, say a grade 8's bullying a grade 5, and then a grade 4 sees it. You can't really stand up to them because they're better in every way.
They're bigger and stronger.
Yeah. So you'd be scared if you get hit and stuff like that. It doesn't really happen.
How about in the same grade? You said it was all grade 5s, and you saw one bullying, and then two people saw it.
Yeah, then they'd stand up. Unless they're the really weakest people in our class. Because since we do weights and stuff, sometimes but if they have they know if it's wrong, they stop it. They
Brennan, what do you think?
I think it's a question of a power struggle, right? I mean, sometimes you can't expect that. And I agree, the innocent bystander is never innocent. But I think sometimes you can't always. I mean, I want to say in a perfect world that person should stand up and say something. But I think sometimes, I'm thinking about my own self. I'm if I was scared of the person who was bullying someone, I don't know that I would necessarily go and do something about it, because it's in a perfect world, yes, I would, but in reality, I don't know that I could.
I mean, even when we look at adults, very few of us stand up to bullying. I mean, it could be in your workplace. You have that coworker who's that pushy coworker. Very seldom do people sort of correct it. I mean, the bystander effect in New York City, when that person was in the 1980s or something like that. Person was died on the street, and no one stopped to help. And hundreds of people just walked past that person, right?
Because they assume someone else will.
Someone else will take care of it, right? Why would I extend that or extend myself to help, right? So I think it's kind of in our nature to sort of stay away. As you said, it'd be great if we all could step up and make sure everyone's taken care of. But I think we're kind of going against our nature a little bit there, right? But that's why we should try to instill that in our kids.
And I think in your own class and trying to build that sense of community that we're in here together and this is a safe space. And I think things like that encourage people to come forward.
Proactive, right?
Yeah.
But and I think you made a point. It is a power. and when you were talking about certain kids, you said weak or strong, right? And there's a hierarchy that's established, whether it's physical or emotional, and that's, I think, where we need to focus on. Now, how do we level that off? I mean, it won't be a perfect level, but how do we learn to accept everyone for different strengths, right? And that might mitigate some of the bullying that's happening if everyone feels they have something that they feel valuable. I read an article about, you were asking earlier about parents, what parents can do, and they said that for kids, it's a sense of belonging. And they have to have a peer group where they feel they belong. And kids who have that tend to deal with bullying much more effectively. So that could be a sports team, that could be arts, that could be any kind of club or activity that they're part of, that they are valued for who they are and are respected for it.
So it could be activities outside of
school, right? Because not all our children are going to be successful academically. So if they're in something else where they get self-value and they feel good about themselves, they're given a little bit of a tool to deal with bullying, right? And sometimes we, in our community, we forget that. It's all academics, and that should take care of everything.
And if you're doing extracurriculars, it's like music or dance or piano, or it's like it's not really about branching out and finding other interests. So
I wanted to go back to the social media and how it continues after 3:30 p.m. and goes continuously on. Can schools, and from an official perspective, can they play a role in it? Can they, to schools and teachers, how can they do that, given stuff happening offline in cyberspace, no jurisdiction?
Nope, the school has, there's been cases of students being expelled and suspended for activity outside of school in terms of cyberbullying. It doesn't stop. At 3:30, if a student of yours is bullying someone online, they're still held liable. In the academic setting, and also if they're old enough, it would be police involvement as well.
And in like anything on the internet is on the internet, so that's I'm not sure if jurisdiction plays a part in that, because our admin can access it. And I know of people who've done that, where they've gone online, found the Facebook post, presented to a student, and said, explain this. And then if they are old enough, then the police are involved.
So in London,
like last year when we had some bullying incidents, that was the first thing that we asked the students to do. Can you print out the Facebook pages? And they printed pages and pages, and then brought it to us, which passed it over to administration. Right? Anything you put online, it's gonna be accessible.
Okay. It's time for a short break, but we'll continue the discussion with what happened in London, Ontario. Dear viewers, please join us after a few short announcements. Welcome back, dear viewers. On CrossRoads today, we're discussing the topic of bullying. Joining us are teachers Haran Krishna and Branavi Malvaganam, and a sixth grade student, Gohul. This past week, we saw there was an arrest in London, Ontario of 8 high school girls for their bullying of a fellow student at school, offline as well, and they're arrested and they're facing criminal charges. Some argue that our laws regarding bullying, especially in the high school, the latter years of high school from 16, 17, 18, are not strong enough. How do you guys feel about that?
I think that the laws, can definitely be stronger, because I mean, by that, like you were saying earlier, by the time they're in the 9th grade, they've had almost 10 years of, these so they know exactly what it looks like, and they do understand what they are doing. By the time you're 16, you have some realization of that. When you're 10, you might not necessarily understand what you're doing, but I think by 16 you have that understanding, and I think you should be held responsible. I don't know if anyone else disagrees.
Yeah, I agree to some extent. I think, and as Gokul said, I mean, most bullies tend to have been bullied or have something in their past that contributes to that. So I don't know if just a stronger legislation will fix the problem, but maybe more support along with a stronger legislation might be more effective. Right? I mean, the last thing we need to do is at 16 label a kid as you're unproductive to society, right? So I don't know, it's complex, but definitely they should be held accountable at 16, as you said. They're fully aware of what they're doing, and I mean, I'm thinking about the Rutgers University student, the something Ravi.
Tyler Clementi.
Yeah, Tyler Clementi.
Ravi
Drew, right. And he posted a video in university at Rutgers, fully knowing that that's going to hurt his roommate, and
the intent was to hurt.
The intent was, and he just, I think he got 30 days.
That's it.
Right, 30 days for, and the other person committed suicide. So you contributed to a person's death, and you got 30 days, and that's very lenient.
It's just murder without a weapon, right?
Exactly right. There.
During the break, Gokul, you mentioned an important story that creates bullies or creates negative feelings that may lead to bullying and is bullying in itself. Can you tell us?
Teachers sometimes might yell at the student for not doing it. Like, say that they have a good student and this student might not do as well. So like they don't usually do their homework and stuff. The teacher might like yell at them saying like, why didn't you do this and stuff, especially at gym, because it's about like, are you like, can you do this or not? And like at our school, our gym teacher yells at you if you don't do it right. So because since it's like the whole grade 6 classes, like everyone would know what you did wrong and what you didn't do. So like, and then that would create negative feelings, and then they would want the anger to go out, and then like they like bully other people. So teachers also create bullies too.
They get bullies. And how have the kids responded? Have they told the teacher they don't appreciate, they don't like it?
Well,
or are they scared to?
One student in our class is like takes it too seriously. So like the person who needs help, kind of like the teacher is like telling him to do not like sit at your desk for like 5 times, and then like she isn't screaming or anything. She's like calm and like saying it like a normal teacher. And then this is what he does. He says, I'm gonna go out, and then the teacher's like, yeah. And then he actually does go out. Last year he actually did go to his house.
He left the school.
Yeah, he left the school, but then he came back, I think, because he got in trouble or something. And then this year he went out for a few minutes and then came back in.
And have you seen this before elsewhere?
What child taken off?
Oh no!
We call them runners. Yes.
How teachers contribute to is that kind of
I mean, no, it's a good point, right? I mean, I'm a pretty strict teacher. I'm a gym teacher too, but but it's not based on physical ability in my classroom. Their marks are based on their how much they want to push their fitness level, not on skill. But aside from that, I am a fairly strict teacher. Teaching grade 8s, I have to prepare them for grade 9. Right, and so it's a different beast with middle school students. They don't necessarily understand why they need to work hard. It's almost like a pointless endeavor, right? So it's a fine line. But I think if, as an educator, if your heart is there to improve that child, any method you take, I think kids will see that, right? If a teacher takes a harsh tone with you, but you understand that teacher is there truly to help you, then you sort of, I hope anyway, that you sort of give them that break. Whereas a teacher who's there and like certain teachers have rules for their convenience. You know, everyone needs to sit at their desk, no one can speak, not because it's good for the kids, it's because it's easy on them, right? If you're that type of educator, then yeah, things that you say are going to have a much deeper impact, right? But you're right. I mean, you never know what the impact is, even if your intentions are well-meaning. Kids could take it in any different form.
On a greater level, are schools, because they want to appear favorable and invite positive reviews of their school, do they sweep some of the serious bullying incidents underneath the carpet?
It's been documented, especially in the high school level. I mean, with Jordan Manners, that there was many examples of serious.
Can you give a little background on the Jordan Manners?
A
couple of years ago,
it was
4
years ago. A student was killed in the hallway, and I forget the name of the school. C.W. Jeffries. And when they did the investigation, they found that there was many cases of assault and bullying that were taking place in the school, and the administration didn't act on it appropriately. I'm not sure how they acted upon it, but it was poor. And so it happens. I mean, you wish it didn't, and to some extent, maybe even in our classrooms, sometimes we see certain things and we sort of assume it's harmless when in reality it could have been something more serious.
Have you noticed this?
I'm a newer teacher, so I mean that's a harder question for me to answer. I am like that case there with C.W. Jeffries. I wonder if it's also because of the type of neighborhood it's located in. I mean, that school already had so many other issues to deal with that maybe this just seemed like one of many other situations where it's just reoccurring. I don't know if it was intentionally. I haven't read that article. I'm sure I can't really comment on it. But I'm just, I don't know, like I guess it depends on the type of school too. Some schools, you know, they have this reputation of, because of the communities they're located in and the struggles those communities are facing, they have different types of problems than say the ones that are in more affluent neighborhoods. They're not dealing with the same problems. So that's a hard question. I personally haven't seen it, but at the same time, I'm also a newer teacher. And I would like to think that the administration I have worked with so far have been diligent about following up with these things. But
you know, so research has shown, and you guys talked about how bullying comes out of a lack of self-esteem, self-confidence. Other research shows that, you know, bullying is a learned behavior. The social aggression is something we take in through different forms. Do you think there's that aspect to it, that these kids are learning it?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
of course, yeah. Do you want to?
Where do you think they learn it from?
From sometimes from their parents. You know how like some parents when they drive they like drink and stuff like that, like and then they like talk bad to their kids. They hit them and stuff like that. The kid might think like you're supposed to do that to other people. So then they learn it from their parents, and then sometimes they might learn it from other kids. So like from like big people. So like if you have cousins from grade 12, university and stuff like that, they might learn it from them, and then like that's what they learn from. Usually it's from their family. Sometimes it's from other kids.
But I mean, how serious do you think that we're learning bullying? Some kids are learning it through their older cousins or family members.
Well, I think that we always try to emulate people that we look up to or think are important, or we like them. So if we see them behaving a certain way, we sort of adopt their practices because we think it's okay. And that's the idea of the whole role model situation, right? Like when you're, like I know with my cousins, when I'm around them, I have certain rules of how we're supposed to behave with each other. And hopefully they've learned from that. But I think that, the people in our lives, they do influence us, but it's not just the people in our lives, it's also the people on TV. And I think they play an even greater role, because earlier we were talking about like Simon Cowell and Donald Trump and who they are as people, and it's entertaining and it's funny and we laugh. And then
do you think we send a double message to our kids? One of my students in social studies remarked how they had an assignment, they had to watch CPAC, so they had to watch the House of Commons, and they saw the nature of the debate between the ruling party and the opposition MPs, and they were like, hey, they're so rude to each other. The first comment they had, first observation. And do you think that's true? We're sending a double message to our kids?
No, we're definitely sending a double message to kids. We accept a lot of media that's really unacceptable, and then we expect our kids to act a different way. I mean, yeah, if you ever watch politicians speak, it's not friendly at all, and those are people making decisions for us, right? So it's difficult for children to figure out what's acceptable, how much of rude behavior is acceptable, and how much of it is not. And we were talking earlier about such a fine line. What is really bullying, right? What's just natural way of growing up, and what's over the bounds, over the line, and out of bounds, right? So it's difficult. I mean, and you made an interesting point about even parents, right? I mean, the way they speak. Right, and if parents are speaking to the child in a certain way, or driving and they have road rage and they're yelling at other people, then you're sort of modeling
how they're treating each other.
How they're treating each other, of course, right? And then you're modeling that behavior, and your child grows up thinking that's acceptable. And so once they manifest that in different ways, is it really the child's fault?
It also matters about cartoon shows. So say like little grade 1s and 2s, right? They like act like their favorite character in a show. So like a lot of people like Hulk. So they might think like they want to be Hulk. So they might punch people and stuff like that. Like in grade, like for me that wasn't like that much, but I've been like seeing people do that. So like two kids playing with each other, like one person's Iron Man or one person's Hulk. They fight each other, like they just fight, and then one person gets hurt, and then they tell on each other. So it also matters about what they watch. So that's why most of the shows are like 8+, 10+, and stuff like that.
And what as the last question for the show, what are the long-term effects of bullying? What are the long-term considerations or effects that has on a person?
I mean, there's psychological impact of if you're bullied and it has affected you, you could hold on to that for the rest of your life. That could affect how you approach other relationships, how you approach your career, how you approach your academics. You could have anxiety disorders. Some lead to depression. So there's a whole gamut of responses that you could have to it, right? So. Right.
I agree. I think it really damages your self-confidence and your self-esteem, and that really I don't think that ever leaves you. And I think, like you were saying, it carries into the workplace and it carries into all others, even your personal relationships. I think it lingers and it never really.
And it affects all relationships.
Yeah.
Goal as the final comment for the show. Why should we stop bullying?
Well, first because everyone's like when you get bullied, you usually want to like cut yourself or something like that when it's like bad bullying. So like when it's very serious. So like, and then some people suicide, and then like, so that's why we need to stop bullying, because like people are dying for no reason.
For no reason. That's it. Thank you, Haran. Thank you, Gohul and Branavi, for coming on today's show. Thank you, dear viewers, for tuning in into TVI's Crossroads. I'm your host, Parthi Kandaval. Please have a good week.
தமிழரின் பிம்பம் உங்கள் டிவி.